pleasant and productive day to all our viewers on the Guyana Learning Channel. Today we have in the studio Fazia Bakch, Senior Mistress of Queen's College and teacher of geography, Petal Jetu, Science Coordinator in the Ministry of Education, and Ms. Flora Comabadge, Assistant Superintendent of Examinations, Ministry of Education. And I am your moderator, Melcita Bovell, Technical Assistant to the Ministry of Education. Today we are going to talk about school-based assessment. It is that thing that we hear about in secondary school all the time, SBAs. For some people, it's the dreaded three-letter word, and for others, it's that special package that allows a student to perform even better at the CXC examinations. School-based assessment, as we all know, is a continuous assessment of the student's work, and the students are guided on a day-to-day basis by their teachers. And it's this growth and development of the student that is documented. The final grade that we send to CXC is an accumulation of all the efforts of the students, depicting the growth and development, resulting in a final grade to CXC. Now, Ms. Comabadge, could you give us an insight as to how important school-based assessments are to students as they attempt the CSEC examinations?
Mrs. Buffield, it is very important. It helps the student's final grade at the examinations. Now, SBA helps the students' knowledge, the development of the knowledge, skills, and attitude in a particular subject area.
I noticed, Ms. Comabadge, in all of the things you said, you used the word help. And that is always a positive thing. Anything that will help our students to do better is what it's all about, the final grade. Fazia Bakch, in your experience as a geographer, how does the school-based assessment help your students?
First of all, the students get some marks to take into the examination. As a matter of fact, the SBA scores make up 15% of the total score that the student will receive for geography. So they're going in with something. The SBA itself is marked out of 40, but that is 15% of the total score. Now, for geography, students are required to do skills. They're required to analyze data, and you find that very difficult to do teaching a particular topic. The students need the experience.
I'm glad you talk about experience, because we're getting across here loud and clear that SBAs is not just some things you go on the internet, you download a set of information, you put it nicely together, hand your teacher, and wow, you got 15% of your exam grades.
Exactly. Now I would hear students come back and say after they finish completing an interview, Miss, but I never thought people lived that way. I never knew that this really happened in certain communities. Now I understand how, for example, dispersed communities really evolve. What are the reasons people living there? Seeing the diagram in the textbook doesn't really, help us to get exactly what it is. But for example, going into an Amerindian community and you have to ask people questions, and then from your observations, you're seeing certain things. It makes your life as a geography student so much richer. It transforms this whole content that you would do into experiences that you can have for life.
And so geography now becomes real to your students.
Exactly.
That this now is experiences that will help them to move forward in life.
Exactly.
And we begin to see the benefit, the real benefit of geography.
Yes.
So in short, the school-based assessment is very much practically oriented.
Exactly.
And is bringing to life the things that you would have been seeing in your textbooks and discussing in your classroom.
Yes.
Ms. Jetu, how does that practical aspect, I know science is all practical, in my book at least. So tell me, how does that sense of a practical experience relate to the science subjects?
Well, for me, science is not a subject. It is a way of life. As you say, it's really a practical experience. and geography is an applied science. Now, what happens in our experiences in life, it is all science. If you get up in the morning, for example, and you take a bath, you might not realize the amount of science you would have used, because if certain materials were not soluble in water, for example, which is our universal solvent, it would be so difficult for us to take that bath, for example. Now, in our schools, at the secondary level especially, the CSEC syllabus has been designed in the sciences to allow students to develop, as Ms. Cumberbatch mentioned earlier, the knowledge, the skills, and the attitude. And what we have in science, we just cannot give the knowledge and expect the students to be interested enough to go further at the tertiary level. It's your ability to do science, to think science, and to understand how it all fits in, because if we're living on planet Earth, we need to understand how it works. It is our home.
Yes,
To
Ms. Chetu,
understand-
one of the focus I want us to get to is the concept of attitude. Because as you talked just now, you talked about tertiary level, because we know in the school system we are training students who will go into all range of sciences as they leave the education system, and their attitude is most important. Can you say how those school-based assessment help to shape and form those attitudes?
Exactly. As I was saying, if we're living on planet Earth, and if we do not understand how it works, then we will not have a positive attitude to take care of it. But if we understand how it works, and that is what science is all about, understanding what is around us and how it works, we will have an appreciation for example, for our environment. We will be able to take care of it. We will know that if we throw certain things down the drain, we will cause blockages and so on. Coming back to the SBAs, where it helps to shape attitudes. For example, we provide knowledge, the content in science, but in the chemistry, biology, and physics syllabus, and in the integrated science as well, related to each specific topic would be a suggested practical activity to do. What we should be doing and what we are doing, we teach those topics, and then we give the children a practical, which is the SBA component of the CSEC syllabus. And so while they do that practical, they develop the skills and the realization, okay, for example, two clear solutions can cause us to get a yellow precipitate, and it builds that excitement. And so they want to understand, how does this work, and then what can this help us to do to solve problems? Okay, we have a lot of natural products in Guyana, for example, and students might be interested in experimenting in extracting some of our natural products, and we are told that our forests, our standing forests, are so important to us. For example, our trees. Now we can sell our trees for carbon credits, but what if we were to find out what were in the leaves of those trees? Then we would be able to sell the leaves, the natural products, and we would be able to, while we do that, we do not take all the trees down, but we use what is available to us, we take care of it, so that the collection of the positive attitudes, taking care of our environment, understanding what we have around us, and being more tolerant people. And I think this should be strongly emphasized, because what science process skills really teach us, the skills of observation, of communication, of experimenting, and the whole range of other skills, it really teaches us patience and tolerance. And if we look around in our society, we see a very limited amount of patience and tolerance sometimes. So if all of our people, all of our citizens were to be scientifically oriented or have a basic level of scientific literacy, then we would have a more patient, tolerant society that moves forward in terms of development. So we will be able to use what we have. sustainable.
To the best of
Exactly.
making Guyana most
Yes,
productive.
and
And as
so
you
it
talk,
is
I talk of the utility of the forest floor and what
Exactly.
seems like debris, but that's a whole new topic which we
Exactly.
can get very excited about. But as I listen to the two of you, I think of all the attitudes and skills and the practicality coming out with our students. But I want us to go to the rigidity of the school-based assessment in the classroom, because I think this part is of importance to our parents, because parents are paying attention and they're being involved with their children at home and giving them support. But sometime at the end of the term, they're suddenly called to say, you know what, your daughter Jane did not submit school-based assessment. So how is it we can empower our parents to keep track of the school-based assessment as the children are doing it? Because, Ms. Cumberbatch, you know that if they do not have the school-based assessment to send to CXC, they're going to be receiving something very particular on their examination slip.
Ungraded.
Could you tell us something about that?
Yes. If a student does not do the SBA or present the SBA on time to the class teacher, then the end result will be ungraded for that particular subject. Now, SBA is a continuous
Yes.
activity. It's continuous. And we heard earlier that science is done from the very first term in the fourth year, and all the subjects are done very early in the fourth year. Now, for example, my special area is business.
Yes.
So the child is identified to be in the business department. When the child gets into that fourth form, there are certain skills, as I mentioned before, that the child should be equipped with. Now, for example, the child needs to know how to prepare a questionnaire for the future preparation of this SBA. Now, that particular teacher might not be competent enough, or that teacher feels, look, I have a very good language teacher. Let me have that teacher come into my classroom and have my children, prepare my children with that skill. Or if I don't want to do that, I can ask the teacher to do what we call integration in the classroom and prepare at this period in the first term of the fourth year, do preparation of questionnaire in the language program.
Ms. Cumberbatch, I'm glad that you have started down that track, because one of the focus we want to get across to teachers, parents, and the community as a whole, because all of these are persons who come together to support the student. We want to get across that this school-based assessment is not a test. It can be supported by members of the community. It can be supported by older brothers and sisters. It can be supported by other teachers. And so school-based assessment is a whole school issue. And I particularly liked when you mentioned how we can cause parts of it to be done in other subject areas. So can you expand on that a little bit more?
Yes, Melcita. The other thing we can do, now CXC has identified in our syllabuses, our syllabi, that we can use 4 periods, or if you can afford in your school to use 5 periods for the particular subject, it's fine with them. Now, let's look at the 4-period classes. 2 of those periods must be a double period.
Yes.
So we can do lots of work, continuous work for that 80 minutes or whatever is your double period. The other 2 periods, we will have 1 period allocated for the subject in terms of the syllabus, and the other period, the last of the 4, we will put that specially for SBA. So we have, let's say, our notebooks. 1 will be for principles of business or accounts, where we do all our exercises, copy our notes, all activities. And the other one will be for my SBA. school-based
And this
assessment.
is so very important for parents to understand, because as you allot and you purchase material for the students, we need to get a sense across the floor. What is it that students must have before they begin their school-based assessment? Mrs. Cumberbatch has pointed out that they need to have a special notebook for school-based assessment. Ms. Jettu, what is it they need to have in the sciences?
They need to have a special notebook for the experiments in the sciences that they will write up, because in the lab you're basically doing your experiments and you do not want to at that time write up your neat report. So you will have a science notebook, which is not your subject notebook but a separate notebook for you to write up your experiments. And it is advisable as you complete, as if I were a student, I would want to complete my report as soon as I finish my experiment,
Yes.
because if I let a week or two pass, I will forget what I have done.
Just on a point there, Ms. Jettu. Now, I would see some of these books selling at bookstores for SBAs. Are these the notebooks you're referring to?
Yes, those SBA notebooks that you mentioned, those are the books that the students should use to write up their final report, but they will still need another ordinary notebook, which they need to make jottings and observations as they go along in the lab to make their own notes, because when it comes to the end of the term, for example, they will be assessed based on the content that they were provided in class, the knowledge, and they will also be assessed on the skills.
Yes.
So the practical as well as the theory will be assessed, and as well as the requirements for CXC, we need to provide our students with the practical knowledge as well as the content, the theory. And those go hand in hand to form what we call the teaching of concepts, because we cannot teach concepts in science without doing the practical experiments.
Yes, before you move off from those same notebooks, I wanted to say, because we want parents to know that even though these beautiful notebooks are sold in bookstores, they're not essential. What we need is a notebook. A plain, simple, ordinary, clean notebook will be just as effective. The bottom line is we will guide the students how to rule up those notebooks so that they can present their material. So we want parents to understand that it's fine if you want to purchase the books that are already ruled in the stores, but it's not necessary. Because we have parents of varying degrees of affluence in our communities, and we don't want to force them to buy things that are not absolutely necessary for the production of the school-based assessment. But I wanted to go beyond that, Ms. Jettu, because I recognize you were saying it's the beginning of the term for the sciences. But I wanted to ask Mrs. Batch if she can say to me what time in grade 10 or Form 4 we begin the school-based assessment for geography.
The ideal time is like the third or fourth week in that term. The reason is that you need to cover some content related to the SBA. Now, I want to make this point very clear. For geography, the topics are divided according to systems, and those systems are independent of each other. They can be taught one before the other, not necessarily in the order as the syllabus.
Okay.
So if as a teacher, some of us have our own preferences. Some of us are, are very strong in one area. You're not so comfortable in another area. If you think that this is the direction I would like the SBA to go, start that particular system and that topic, all that is needed so that the children will be prepared, probably like at the beginning of the second term in Form 4.
So as you begin to teach that topic, you can see light bulbs going on in children's mind as to how I'm selecting my SBA topic.
Exactly, and you direct them you know, ask them questions. You know, how about if we do something in this area? What you think about it? You know, I think this is a good area because, as a matter of fact, it hasn't been done before. You know, I want you to think about it. And then you introduce another topic under that same system, and you see where they go, and you kind of build their interest and see where this is taking you. And then in your mind as the teacher, you're formulating, I think the children will be interested in this. And this brings me to the other point. Now, when I started teaching geography, I used to have very large classes, like 60 students. And what I found, it was very, very difficult to mark
I
60
can well imagine.
SBAs of 60 different topics. And, checking this and making sure that every aspect that is required is completed the way it should. Fortunately, I was a part of a workshop where Mrs. Betty Ann Roller, the author of Social Studies Skills, and Dr. Patrick Williams, they conducted this workshop, and they advised that geography students should do one SBA. Everybody do one SBA.
This is very important for our teachers to know all across Guyana because, yes, it is demanding. Yes, we want to ensure that you mark all the SBAs and submit them on time, but we don't want to cause you undue stress.
Exactly.
So there is a way in which we can cope. But let me be the devil's advocate
Yes.
here and ask you, how is it you manage to ensure that you're not marking the same piece of work 24 times because we all copied from our friend who would have done the research?
Okay, this is very unique. What we do is that the SBA is divided, parts of it is given to groups of students. Now you have to do a site map. So the students who are more inclined, for example, you would have the boys who do the technical drawing and
Yes,
so.
they bring a special skill to the
Exactly.
table.
So they would ask to do that map. So, all their designs and all the skills that they would have learned in that subject, you see it incorporated there. Then you have some students who are very outgoing, very friendly. Those are the ones who want to do interviews.
The interviews, that's
Those
right.
are the ones who want to do questionnaires because we have to do it on a face-to-face basis because of the fact that you cannot always give and then go back at another day because of the locations at where you might want to go. So, those are the children that go there. Now, when they come back as the big group, all the data is presented. All the data is presented. Each child is responsible now for explanations in their own writing. So, for example, you have the methodology. Everybody knows that you knew, or they would have known that you went to the field trip on the 14th of February, for example. The dates, the time, the where. But you would see their explanations are going to vary. Their descriptions are going to vary. The things that would have meant more to them.
Yes, because
would
each one
come
sees
out.
through its own eyes.
Exactly.
From its own experiences
Exactly.
too.
So when they come to present their data and analysis, for example, you have a set of figures, 17, 19, 20, for let's say how goods are transported to Lethem. Some would say by air, some would say by truck, some would say by 4x4. So you have, different figures there. Some children might choose to do it in a bar graph. Some might do a pie, Some might do, different ways these children will. Some might have pictures.
It opens the creativity of the student.
Exactly.
Right.
So it doesn't limit them. The only thing that is similar is their data. And the other thing is too, you see, when they would have been divided up into groups, a particular group will concentrate on a questionnaire, for example, for business people or for shoppers or whatever. So this group would have, you as the teacher would have time to check to ensure that this is where you want them to go.
Each follow-up question is leading
Exactly.
you to the point.
Now imagine you doing that for 60 individual students. Now this is where your life as the teacher becomes important because you can monitor, you can monitor how exactly these children are going. So at the end of the day, each child is able to present a separate SBA.
That is so wonderful, and I allowed you time to explain that because I know how many teachers are out there, and some are brand new to this, and sometimes they avoid teaching the subject because of the challenges of the SBA. So I'm glad that you were able to explain that so that our teachers can appreciate that there are ways of circumventing the stress, as it were. And parents too can appreciate that even though you are sharing some material, you're not copying from each other. Because fact is fact.
Yes.
And the size of Ghana is going to be the size of Ghana regardless of whose notebook it's
Yeah,
documented in.
Exactly.
Now, Miss Flora, could you tell us when is it that the business SBAs begin in schools?
Okay. The business SBAs begin as early as the first term in the fourth year. As I was saying previously, we have a number of things we want to ensure that the children are equipped with that knowledge. So that will go probably between the first term. The second term, we take our time, as Fazia was mentioning just now, to ensure that the concepts, what are the objectives, what do we want to achieve when we complete this activity. So we go through the whole gamut of the thing with them, the students. So by the third term, we know that they have the knowledge. So we can begin to write, the third term in the fourth year, we can begin to write up our objectives. We would have selected our topics, we would have gone through the profiles to ensure that whatever I am going to do will fit, will be an appropriate SBA topic. Now, some teachers have the option. You can go the way of the geography idea just now and probably have your whole class do the business, one topic, or you can have them in groups. And the same idea, right? We're not encouraging individual because, again, it will be a lot of work. So we're asking that the teachers in the school begin to timetable their curriculum to accommodate the early initial stages of the SBA, and then we go through, we continue. At the end of the third term, that's the long vacation.
Yes.
By then, students should be on their way with the SBAs. Now, this whole SBA idea is a continuous thing, and we've been working in our notebooks. Teachers are going to be marking constantly, checking. In that one period, we're only doing SBAs, and we're telling them, do not meet us on the corridor with your SBA. Come here in this one period.
Very organized and systematic.
Yes, and let us get the whole the thing ironed out. So the students will be, developing
But even as you say geography and you say business, it's the same thing for social studies.
Yes.
And it's the same for technical drawing.
Yes.
You have to do it step by step. But I want to go to Ms. Jetu because I heard you two ladies talking about how we can save the teacher some stress and we can do one SBA for the whole class. But I know for the sciences, either they're not so lucky or because it's also exciting, they want to do 18 different SBAs because the syllabus itself dictates the range of topics that you have to do. Because this is the kind of questions that we get from parents. Why is it that we have to do one SBA for geography and for the sciences they have to do tons and tons of them? But the syllabus itself dictates the range of topics that you have to do the SBAs on. Ms. Jetu, you want to shed some greater light on that?
Sure, and I think you mentioned the word exciting, and I think that is exactly what it is, because I cannot do a topic in science without the experiment, and every topic in science has relevant experiments or practicals that you need to do. And that is why in the sciences we cannot do one SBA, because one SBA, for example, to develop, let's say, or design an experiment to test the acidity in vinegar, will not be relevant in organic chemistry, where we can make esters, perfumes, or make soaps,
exciting things,
and so on, and it would not be relevant for the different types of salts, where we have insoluble salts, we have soluble salts, and you would use different methods, for example, to make those salts. So that is where the excitement comes in. And that is why I mentioned earlier that in the sciences, you could actually start the SBAs as you start to teach the subjects in the first term, because as Ms. Cumberbatch mentioned, it is important that we have timetabled SBA periods. If we have, for example, and I'm sure most schools would have 4 periods for the separate sciences.
At least 4.
And integrated science. So what we would do, you take the first 2 periods in the week to teach the theory, the concept. So if you're teaching acids, bases, and salts, you will teach about acids, bases, and salts the first 2 periods in the week. And then the last 2 periods in the week, you're going to follow up with the experiment that is relevant to acids, bases, and salts. So you might want to do a titration, or you might want to make salts. It is up to the teacher. What is very interesting is, as well for the sciences, is the 18 SBAs required, for example, in biology, or the 16 required for chemistry. They should not be done at the end of the period. For example, when you teach all of the content, then as a teacher now I will say to myself, okay, I have taught everything that the syllabus requires, now I will do my SBAs. You should really do them according to the
I am glad that you said that, because as they talked in the other subjects, they talked of continually doing this. But it's even more than that. CXC wants to be able to judge the students' growth. So they don't expect the quality in SBA number 1 to be the same as SBA number 17, because as your knowledge and skills grow, you know, they want to see this manifested in the work that you are producing.
Exactly.
And so pacing the students and timing them and ensuring that you get some degree of good quality from the beginning. But I want us to focus on the variety of skills, because yes, it's 18 practicals, but we're not testing the same skills all the time. And Ms. Batch, in the beginning you started to tell us about some of the skills, and you talked about the skills to interview people and obviously to draw maps and so on. Could you give us a sense of the range of skills that are incorporated in any one school-based assessment for geography?
The main focus, as you said, it would have those practical skills, you know, like you have to learn to draw maps. The students would have to learn to draw maps and diagrams, generate graphs from the computer, and so on. But more importantly, it helps them to analyze the data.
Yes.
It is not about figures, but what do these figures translate to? How exactly the data I am collecting related to the aim of my study? Where am I going with this? How does this prove that there is a problem here? Or how does this prove that what I would have started out in my statement of a problem is saying, how does this really show that there is a problem? How does this confirm what I was saying all along? Or how does this disprove the initial statements that I would have made? So this, you know, it calls for a lot of, you know, putting the data and, you know, internalizing it and then writing it so that, you know, so you could see that this has meaning, this has relevance to exactly what I am studying. You know what can come out to? Sometimes children read things in a book. Like, for example, with the 6th form, they would do different theories. Now, they can do an SBA, and sometimes that can either prove that that theory is right or disprove it based on the situation in which that SBA or internal assessment was conducted. You know, so it makes them excited to know that nothing is hard and fast. These theories are just there, or these, you know, generalizations are just there. But how can we really prove that these things are happening? You know, and you give people this kind of excitement. I remember at CXC, you know, the marking exercise, when they read the SBA that the children presented of LETM, They wanted to organize a tour just to go to Lethem to see it through these children's eyes, because they couldn't imagine how, a group of probably 60 students would have seen that Lethem is just so isolated. It seems so isolated, yet they're able to do economic activities there. So, this whole idea that economic activities, you need to have raw materials and all these things that people are saying.
All the
and
theories
so on.
that Guyana can show we can do beyond the theories.
Believe me, and the children were saying, how much scope it has, and plenty of people did not know that you had land available, for example, at very, very low costs, especially if you want to do business. So these children were able to point these things out. And when I came back with the news, of how well the SBA was done, you could see the excitement in these children.
You should take them back to Lethem now to see that all that they were talking about has now blossomed, and you do have vibrant economic activity in
Yes,
Lethem.
so these, it is, the transformation of this data that they would have collected into their
Yes, has
experiences.
really come to life.
Yes, and, proving theories or either disproving them. That is what the SBA is all about. And I would like to mention, just please permit me, the two, Ms. Jetu and Mrs. Komobach, would have mentioned about timetabling. It is very, very important for teachers, your schemes of work, to write it down. This week, I'm going to do, if it's week 3.
Yes, what specific aspect of my
Exactly.
school-based assessment
So
will
it
be tackled?
So it doesn't clash with, something else I have to do, or, some topic I haven't covered.
So it's not extra work.
No,
it
it
is delivery
isn't.
of the syllabus.
Exactly. So that when you do it in school, the children do not have to go home to wonder about certain things. The only thing they have to do is probably improve on what was already done and marked in school. So that at every stage, you can monitor as the teacher.
So basically, Ms. Batch, we want to say clearly that if this is managed as it's intended to be managed, it shouldn't be very stressful on our children, and by
Very well.
extension, their parents.
Very well. Very well.
Ms. Jetu, teachers in science have got a wide range of skills to cover, and some skills are done earlier than others. Can you give us a spread across of the skills that must be done in sciences?
Sure, Ms. Bovell. First, we want to develop in our students some ability of manipulation and measurement. To be able to analyze data first, as Ms. Baksh mentioned. You have to be able to correctly collect that data. And to correctly collect that data, you have to be able to use the instrument or the instruments to be able to guide you to collect the data correctly. And then you can have a good analysis. So in the sciences, and what Ms. Baksh has mentioned in geography is really an application of the scientific method, which
Very much so.
applies across all fields of
Subject.
study. And in the core sciences, what we try to do is to provide the students with the skills that would help them later in life and in other subjects as geography, as in business, in engineering, and wherever they choose to go. And when we have developed measurement and manipulation, for example, how to use a measuring cylinder, how to light a Bunsen burner, we will move on to skills such as observation, recording. If you're going to now use these instruments to measure, you will need to know how to observe and record your data. So in the sciences, we have observation, recording, and reporting. If you're going to collect data, if you're going to record it, then you must be able to analyze it and report it. So we have also the skills of analysis and interpretation. And in the sciences, what we tend to do, because we have different pairs of eyes, we see things differently, but what the scientific method does is remove our biases. And so we would test, for example, several times, 2 to 4 times. You would encourage that students, if you're doing titration, you do a rough titration first to get an average of what your results will look like. and then you will take an average of your, for example, 2 or 3 other readings, and you would choose to perhaps present on a bar graph, to plot a line graph. You can write it up in a form of a description. There are several ways to present data. Use statistical methods and so on when you go higher in the sixth form and at university level. And so those are the kinds of skills that the sciences will give to students. The skills of measurement and manipulation, observing, recording, reporting, analysis, and interpretation. But finally, when they would have gotten all of those skills, they also, as Ms. Baksh mentioned, sometimes the sixth form students will read about a theory in a book. They can plan and design an experiment based on that theory to determine whether that theory is applicable. If it, for example, if it were written for another country, it could be applied to Guyana. And so that's the range of skills that the sciences give. So from the sciences are really the springboard from which
I appreciate that
jump
because
off.
even as you say that, I understand that they have to make tables and they have to draw graphs, and surely we see them in geography, see them in business, and we see them everywhere. But tell us, what is it we do to ensure that these SBAs are in school, kept safely in school, so that they can get to CXC? How is it that you manage to keep, and what would you recommend?
First of all, the children have to have a special SBA book, an exercise book, and then they would present after every session a complete version of the work that I would have given them, and they place that in a file, and I keep that. So they have their, what we would say, rough in their exercise books, and I have a copy of the final work that they would put in a file, and I would keep there after they would have completed it. And I find it works. In addition, I would ask them, because they would do work on the computer, to save that on the computer that they would have used, and also email it to themselves, so that they can always access a copy either from home or school, from an internet cafe, whatever is available for that purpose.
That is extremely good guidance, because every now and again we hear of circumstances where school-based assessments go missing. And the fact that you are showing them a way of retrieving back their document really does help. Ms. Jetu, what would you recommend for the sciences?
I would recommend, as I mentioned earlier, their notebook, which is equivalent to their rough report.
Right, the laboratory notebook
Right,
that they're maintaining
the laboratory notebook.
at each practical.
Exactly. Their written reports should be submitted to their teacher first for marking, and I would recommend that once those reports are marked, the teacher should discuss with the students or give the students some feedback about how they have done on that practical or
Yes,
experiment.
feedback is absolutely important to improve the next step of the game.
So that they can grow and they can learn. Because sometimes we're excited about the CXC results, which is really the product of learning, but it is the process of learning that is most important and exciting in the sciences. And so that the children, it is important that not only they keep their laboratory notebooks safely, but they also keep a record of what they would have submitted to their teacher, just in the case of an event. Sometimes we have all sorts of things happening.
All possibilities.
Yes, we lose documents. And it is also good for the teacher to be able to keep a record of what he or she has received. As Ms. Baksh mentioned, emailing reports and so on to yourself would be very important. But for those who may not have the facility of a computer or internet, you can make a copy of your reports and keep one for safekeeping.
Yes, in addition to safety, it does help you to have it ready for revision,
Yes.
whether it's a test coming up or it's the real exam at CSEC.
Exactly.
Ms. Cumberbatch, as we're wrapping up, I want to ask you not just to tell me about what happens with school-based assessment for business, but what happens with it when it gets to the superintendent of exams.
Okay. At the office there, we are supposed to have those SBAs into CXC by the 30th of April. So the registrar in Guyana has sent out to schools a timeline in which we expect these SBAs to get to us. Give us 2 weeks. 2 weeks, and we send them up in time. But what I want to let teachers be aware, SBAs provide a feedback both to you and to the students.
Yes.
So the teachers in the classroom, as you work with the students continually, keep working with them over the period, then you should be observing any weaknesses, and no child, no student should be given a lower grade than, should fail the SBA as such.
Precisely.
Because it's a continuous activity and it's teacher guided. Hence, we have to work with those students and ensure that they have a good mark. I'm not saying that you should jack it up if it's not right. But
No,
you
but
should
because
correct
it's
it.
work that you've been pacing them through and correcting them as they go along, you stand the opportunity of having the highest possible
Highest
score
mark.
to go into CXC with. And that is what gives us the jump start to get the highest possible grade at CSEC.
Yes, so examination division has distributed to schools those timelines, because some of them will just look into the SBA, the curriculum guides, and say, okay, it has to get there by the 30th. But we are penalized if you have to pay some $1 billion if you're late.
Well, people always understand when you have to pay the price. But we have had a good while discussing school-based assessment, and I trust that we have been able to provide guidance to our parents and to our teachers, and particularly so to the students who have to do them, to both encourage them and motivate them to do the best they can in getting their school-based assessments so that they have the highest possible score resulting in the highest grade at the examination. I have been your moderator, Melcita Bovell, Technical Assistant to the Ministry of Education. Thank you.